Grotesque, obscene and macabre. These are just some of the words used to describe two controversial sculptures in the heart of the historic city of Nuremberg. For some, fine examples of quirky and subversive modern art. For others, expensive and offensive eyesores. So let's take a closer look at them and ask ourselves the question, is this kind of thing really necessary? Just behind me is the White Tower, which was originally built in the 13th century as part of Nuremberg city defences, until about 150 years later a new city wall had to be built further out to accommodate the expanding city. But in 1978 it was repurposed as an entrance to a station on Nuremberg's brand new U-Bahn system. The project involved tunnelling right underneath an important historical monument without damaging it, so it must have been a relief to everyone concerned when it succeeded. And by the way, in case you were wondering, of course the White Tower was originally white. The station itself wasn't going to be much of a problem, but they were going to have to put an ugly ventilation shaft right in front of the tower. The solution? Disguise it. And so they commissioned an artist called Jürgen Weber to come up with an idea to hide it. And the idea he came up with was the Hans Sachs fountain, known to locals as the Marriage Carousel. It almost didn't happen though. With a price tag of over 2 million marks just to hide a ventilation shaft, the city's politicians were divided over it, as was the city's population. And it is massive. It arrived in 250 pieces which had to be laboriously assembled on site. But what at first looks like a confusing jumble of bizarre images is pretty simple. The key to understanding it is its inspiration, a poem by Hans Sachs, a 16th century shoemaker and playwright who lived and worked in Nuremberg. Inscribed on a marble heart at the back of the fountain, his satirical meditation on the bittersweet realities of married life ring as true now as they did 485 years ago. At the front we see a ram representing masculinity and a nymph representing femininity, together a symbol of eros, the instinct for sensual love. Around the rest of the fountain, arranged like rides on a carousel, according to the artist in no particular order, are 6 scenes inspired by lines from Sachs's poem. There is courtship, with the woman appearing like Botticelli's Venus in a seashell. There is a scene where the husband wastes away while his wife consumes everything. But, moving along, we see the wife looking after the children while the husband remains disinterested. In this scene they're sitting on a pelican, which in medieval times was believed to pluck its own heart out to feed its chicks rather than let them starve, making it a symbol of self-sacrificing motherhood. In the next scene, the couple, sitting on a dragon, are zombie-like apparitions, their decaying flesh falling from their bones as they fight each other not just to the death, but beyond it. But we also have them in happier days, in an intimate moment, preparing to kiss. And then we find them in the fiery depths of hell, chained to each other for all of eternity. And this brings us back to the start, where we can see just what has happened to the ram and the nymph. Rising above all this is Hans Sachs himself, laughing and dancing over the chaos. But one thing becomes evident if you look close enough. As tumultuous as this marriage has been, it did ultimately bear fruit. This is very much a visual representation of for better or for worse. And according to Jürgen Weber, you need a sense of humour to understand this sculpture. Not everybody, though, shares his humour. Aside from the cost, opinion was sharply divided on its aesthetic appeal. Zombies trying to strangle each other? Suicidal pelicans? Dead goats? Who wants to see that? Back in 1984, news reports were full of locals expressing outrage and complaining about the monstrous pseudo-Baroque garbage the city had wasted tax money on. Weber commented that one person had kindly offered to smash his head in, but he also said that the media were distorting the truth. In his experience, most people seemed to like it. But this isn't the end of the story, because about the same time, the same artist created another work that was installed elsewhere in the city, The Ship of Fools. And this one was also inspired by a piece of historical satire, this one by the humanist Sebastian Brandt. His moral satire was published in 1497 and takes up the then popular trope of a ship crewed by idiots to criticize the religious and secular leaders of the time. The illustrations were provided by Nuremberg artist Albrecht Dürer, and it's these illustrations that Weber based the look of his sculpture on. It's a weird ship, of course. Its figurehead is that of a court fool, except that it's not the only figurehead, because there's another one at the other end. So which end of the ship is the front? You can't say. It's directionless, and its mast is the tree of knowledge, except that it's very clearly dead. The tree of knowledge is from the book of Genesis, and so we see Adam and Eve being driven out of the Garden of Eden, or in Weber's modern reinterpretation, the planet Earth, and they're with their son Cain, who is holding a dagger. In the biblical story, Cain was the first murderer. They are accompanied by death and a hound of hell. Around the other side, resignation absent-mindedly spills his drink, while technology and violence team up to drive the ship on to its inevitable destruction. This one, by the way, was also supposed to be a fountain, and in 1990 the city did briefly consider connecting it up to the water supply, but ultimately decided that they had much better uses for the 300,000 marks it would have cost to do the job. Ironic, considering that this is supposed to represent a ship. The sculpture itself at least didn't cost the city much. It's a copy of one that stands in Hamelin, and it was financed by a local patron. And just as with the Marriage Carousel, opinion was quite sharply divided for very similar reasons. There is no question that these sculptures are grotesque, and the issues they raise are, to be honest, quite provocative. But do they really belong here? Or should street art, which after all is visible to everyone, including children, be objectively beautiful and avoid causing offence? And before you start writing your comments, let me just show you something. St. Lawrence's Church, which was completed in 1477, features a richly decorated west front containing, appropriately enough, religious themes. But that doesn't mean it was all wholesome and nice. Ideas like everlasting torture in the afterlife were central to Christian belief at the time, so some of the images are quite disturbing. Now, of course, these carvings are hard to spot if you don't know what you're looking for, but Jürgen Weber's sculptures are unmissable, and both include themes relating to death. Is this really appropriate in such a public space, and is the cost ever justified? Thank you for watching, and down there is another video that you might enjoy, so enjoy away! Go on, click on it.